welcome back, everybody. Another episode of Emerge Podcasts. Today, we're joined by another American, all the way from New York, I believe. We're joined by Shaun Eli. So, Shaun, thanks very much for your time. It's a pleasure.
Sure, thanks. I'm pretty close to where you guys are as far as Americans are concerned.
Yeah,
very much.
Not like I'm in the middle of the country.
No, is that about 7 hour flight?
5?
Is it 5? From New York to...
I guess it depends. It's faster in the winter time.
Yeah.
Because of the prevailing winds. But I don't know. I've been to Scotland, but I flew to London and drove the rest of the way. So I don't know how long the flight is.
Oh, nice. Where did you go in Scotland? Edinburgh?
I was in Edinburgh, and boy, was that an odd experience for a 20-something-year-old American.
Right, 20-something, so that was early on in the career?
Yeah. Well, it was before long before I was a stand-up comedian.
Right, okay. Well, talk to us then, Shaun. Where did you grow up initially, first of all?
New York City and a northern suburb.
Suburb.
Standard boring childhood in America.
Right. So northern New York, is that towards like Buffalo?
No, just north of New York City. Buffalo is way up. Buffalo's Canada, practically. So I grew up right near New York City. Right, okay. 5 kilometers north, something like that.
Interesting. What was your so you said a kind of middle class upbringing then in New York City, or just outside New York City? What did you do? Obviously, I've seen that you went to high school and stuff like that. Did you go to college? Did you get straight into a job?
No, I grew up in a family where you were expected to go to college and probably graduate school, which I didn't do. But right. I went to college. I worked in banking, and then I said, you know what? I'm going to choose happiness over money, and I threw it all away to be a stand-up comedian. Well, not all of it. I kept the money.
What was the job you said? We looked on your LinkedIn, and you were quite high up in was it the Bank of Canada or?
I worked in 3 different banks because Americans can't hold down jobs. I worked in New York. I worked at the National Bank of Canada. Then I worked for an American bank in New York, Republic National Bank, which you guys ate. HSBC took them over.
All right, okay.
And then I worked for an Israeli bank, and then I said adios.
Well, for you,
yeah.
Why Israeli banks? Why was the end of your banking career with an Israeli bank? Is it questionable, or is it?
No, I mean I was doing stand-up comedy and banking for 6 years, and I had to give up one. And also, there was a lot to make fun of, so I could now make a living making fun of the people who used to underpay me.
And maybe not so much Israeli banks, because the Israelis hold grudges.
Well, literally at the end of my job interview there, the woman who was interviewing me asked what I thought of Israelis, and I was honest with her. And I said, Israelis are the only people more obnoxious than New Yorkers. And she was like, that was it. She was like, you understand this place. You're hired.
You're the GM.
So how did the comedy career start? So obviously being in New York City, it's a kind of hub as well for comedy, probably similar to like LA.
Yeah, well, people say if you want to be good, you go to New York, and if you want to be famous, you go to LA. Right, yeah. And I think that's a good description of stand-up comedy, because it was interesting. I was a New York comic for a bunch of years, and I went to LA for a couple of weeks, and I was outside one of the big comedy clubs in LA, the Comedy Store, and I was just talking to a random person there, and he said, "Ooh, you're a New York comic." And I'm like, "What? Why does that impress you? I could be a comic anywhere. Stand-up comedy, stand-up comedy." He's like, "No, New York comics, you have to have material." And I'm like, don't all comics have to have material? And he's like,
that would be, yep, they should.
Yeah. And he's like, LA is different. And then I went on stage and I did, original material, because that's what comedians do. And I heard 3 other comics basically tell the same joke. And it was female comics saying, guys want to date me because I'm an actor and I'm skinny and they think I won't eat much. But the reason I don't eat much is because I'm an actor and I don't have any money. But if you take me to dinner, I'm going to order 5 dinners and 8 desserts and blah. I mean, it's an okay joke, but not when everybody's telling the same joke.
There's no originality there, is there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some, but it's sort of
some truth to it, but everybody's saying it over and over.
Yeah, at least a little bit. I mean, occasionally in New York, you'll hear people with similar themes, but you won't hear like 3 people doing the almost exact same joke.
In the same night. I googled the flight time Glasgow to New York is just currently 10 hours. So
10?
10?
That's what it says. There's a changeover somewhere.
Oh, that'll be why.
Because the world's
No.
all over the place because COVID.
Is there a stop in the middle of the ocean or something?
I think you stop by a whale is currently just got its just floating in their landing planes.
Hey, you got to be a damn good pilot to land on a whale.
They're good. They're very good.
They're always pissed, so they'll be confident.
Aye.
Or the whale is really good because it can actually, swim at, the 100-something knots that an airplane lands at, and then the whale just slows
keeps
down
going.
as the plane slows down.
That might be what happens. So you get 6 hours in, the whale pops up, plane comes down, and it takes you the rest of the way.
Yeah.
It's like silly,
Saves
but
on-
a bit
saves
more
on fuel.
organised.
Yeah.
Saves on fuel.
Save the planet. Yeah.
Right.
Right, so starting off in comedy in New York. So do you remember your first attempt, your first gig?
Yeah, I got lucky because I took a comedy class, because typically people start by going to an open mic night and they just suck. But I took a class, so I had a little bit of a head start in terms of, learning how to write jokes. And I'd been writing comedy for a long time, so my material was not terrible. But I had a little bit of, instruction on how to perform. And it was in front of a supportive environment, because an open mic night, at least in New York, is just every other comic waiting for their time on stage, ignoring the person on the stage. But this was a show basically in front of friends and family of people in the class.
Yeah.
So when I told the instructor, I'm really nervous, so I want to go early to get it over with. But please don't put me up first, because that's the hardest spot, because you got to get the audience going. And he put me up first. He put me up first. It went okay.
Oh, that's good then that it went okay, because I would find it more nerve-wracking doing it in front of friends and family. I would rather it was just a big class of random people.
Well, that's why I made sure not to invite anybody.
Oh, that's good.
I had my girlfriend at the time and the friend who talked me into taking the class that she'd taken were the only 2 people I knew in the audience. And it was much better than if I had all my friends.
How old were you then? What age were you?
I was 40, so I was a grown-up.
So did you write jokes for like Jay Leno and stuff like that when you were a teenager?
I've been, not as a teenager, I've been writing jokes for Jay Leno for maybe, I'd have to figure it out, but maybe 10 years before that. I'd been writing jokes freelance. I wasn't a staff writer, but I was, to give you an idea how long ago this was, I was faxing him jokes.
No way.
Yep. I'd get to the office. I'd read the paper on the train in the morning on the way to work, because I was in a bank, and I would think of jokes. I'd type them up. I'd print them out. I'd put them in the fax machine and hope nobody saw what I was doing.
That's amazing. How do you get that job? How do you get like that sort of gig to write jokes and fax them over?
I got really lucky, because what happened was I'd read the paper in the morning and I'd think of funny stuff, and then it would, disappear from my head. And it was right when Jay Leno took over The Tonight Show from Johnny Carson. And I would watch TV that night, at night, and I'd see him making pretty much the same kind of jokes that I was thinking of. So I called and I just pitched, and I said, I exaggerated. I said, I'm a freelance comedy writer. Do you guys buy jokes? And I spoke to somebody and I gave them some examples, and they sent me some paperwork and they gave me their fax.
Wow.
That doesn't sound lucky to me. It sounds like you just done your thing.
Yeah, had some balls and went for it. That's amazing. I love that. That seems to be a thing. A lot of people just do it. They're just winging it. They're just, I'm a freelance, and it seems to pay off.
There's an expression that, you make your own luck. And I really think that 90% of the good stuff that's happened to me in my life is just being in the right place at the right time. But you got to at least make yourself available to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, definitely.
That's very true. Did you think, is that your was that a moment when they said, fax over jokes, we're like, fuck, it could really carry on to be something quite big?
It could have been. I mean, if I'd been better at it, I would have been a staff writer, because that's where Jay got a lot of his his writers from the freelance staff, but obviously I wasn't hitting on enough, wasn't succeeding enough for him to say, hey, I have an opening, why don't you move to California?
Would it be difficult to translate a joke through a fax machine? Would it have been better if you had the phone call and you could deliver the joke a bit better?
No, they do everything in writing. Even their staff writers,
do they?
type up their jokes and they give it to somebody. Yeah.
Wow.
So they're not pitching. They're not pitching jokes. It's all on paper.
Right.
Wow.
Do you think if you were in a position that you could have given up your banking job at that time and solely focused on freelance comedy writing?
Well, if they'd offered me a staff job, it wouldn't have been freelance. It would have been a salary. The salary was probably more than I was making in banking. But there's a weird thing in TV writers because according to the union, the standard contract, I mean, they can pick different lengths of contract, but the standard one is 13 weeks. And there's a day they have to, if they're not renewing your contract, I don't know, like 2.5 weeks early, they have to tell you. So there's like one day that all the new writers are nervous because they're waiting to hear whether they're getting fired or not. So it would have been, entirely possible that I would have gone out there, worked for 13 weeks and then gotten fired. But he was pretty good. I don't think he fired too many people.
Yeah.
Some shows like fire people left and right.
He's really cool. He loves cars, doesn't he? He loves cars.
He loves cars. He's got, last I knew, like 70 or 80 cars and probably as many motorcycles.
It's too many cars. It's too many. 79 cars too many. I don't think you need that many cars.
Well, you certainly need a different car for every purpose, but I don't think he has like 3 cars because he needs an SUV and a sports car and a luxury car.
Yeah,
I think he's got, close to 100 cars because he likes cars. And if he wants a Ferrari, listen, at least he has a variety. Jerry Seinfeld collects Porsches and he just has a zillion of, the same manufacturer. That I don't know.
What's the show on Netflix? Is it Driving with Comedians? And he was on that.
Coffee
with comedians.
Comedians in cars drinking coffee.
That's right.
Yeah, but he picks the car for the person. He doesn't just use his own cars.
What's the Ivy League of comedy?
So when I started in comedy, my jokes were clean and not for 2 reasons. One is the instructor of the class I took said, well, if you can be a clean comedian, you should be a clean comedian because there's more work for you. Because if you're, you want to do corporate work or a charity fundraiser and you're dirty, they're not going to hire you. And also my brain just generally tends to write cleaner jokes. So I would do, when you start, you're not a professional, you're doing amateur shows at comedy clubs. And I was working in banking and colleagues would see me and they would say, your comedy is clean and we would love to take, clients to a comedy show, but everybody else in the show is filthy. Where can we bring somebody to a clean show? And there weren't any. And I said, you know what? Here's a business that's waiting to be invented. Mm-hmm. And so I put together a company to do clean shows. And I wanted it to sound, fancy and upscale. So I started out calling it Ivy League comedy. And then I was doing a show at a theater in Washington, D.C. And when we arrived on the marquee, they got the name wrong and they wrote the Ivy League of Comedy. And I looked at it and I'm like, I like that better.
Just go.
So I changed the name.
Dolan. Yeah, quite right. As you should.
So there's an example. I don't know if it helped any, but there's an example of just, a happy accident.
Yeah.
It seems to be successful because of the amount of comedians that are on it. Like you said, Jerry Seinfeld, that you said earlier, he's on it.
Well, I mean, he's been in one of my shows, but it doesn't mean I can just call him up and say, come on over and, bring your Porsche to my backyard.
Yeah. Pick up a coffee and a car that I would like, please.
That's a cool name though, because Ivy League, am I right in saying Ivy League schools in America is like the top of schools?
It's actually technically an American university football conference.
Right,
okay.
Is it?
It was, well, these schools have been around for most of them are hundreds of years, but the 8 Ivy League schools are basically just a bunch of schools who said, oh, let's have a football league among the 8 schools. So that is technically all that it means, but it is 8 of the top colleges in the country. Yeah.
Just a happy coincidence then that seems to be the top schools
Well, they don't offer athletic scholarships. So they all have lousy football teams. So, because the big football schools, if you're a decent high school football player, or any sport, actually, they give you money to go to the school. The Ivies don't do that. It's purely based on need. And colleges are expensive in America.
Yeah, that's one thing. We spoke about this with guests who are American previously, the difference in costs for education, healthcare, as opposed to the UK. But schools are just crazy pricing for a top school. Was it maybe like $100,000 maybe a year?
I think it may be less, probably 70 or 80,000 all in. But that's the retail price essentially.
Yeah.
Most people get some sort of financial aid, and if you're really poor, you get almost everything paid for. But you got to fight for it. And I think something. At least a couple of the Ivy League schools, if your parents make less than some big number, like 100 or 150,000 a year, there's no tuition. So that's pretty good. They didn't have that when I went.
Yeah. You just left your parents with a big debt.
My parents saved. This was a problem with my parents because to them, education was the most important thing. So they saved every penny so they could pay for their kids to go to college. And then we knew people who were like, they would buy a new car every 2 or 3 years. They took fancy vacations. And then when their kids applied to college, they said, we don't have any savings. And they got financial aid. And boy, did that upset my mother. She was like, that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Oh,
that would piss me off big time.
Yeah.
You would immediately take all that money and go on like the best holiday anyone's ever dreamt of.
The Caribbean cruise, So what's the perception, maybe your perception anyway? So right now in the UK, I don't think there's a massive push on education as much as there used to be. And simply probably because you don't need certain qualifications to get certain jobs anymore. Would you say that's similar to America? Or do you still, if you're applying for a job in a bank, for example, would you have to have a certain level of qualifications?
Yeah, you pretty much need a university degree, unless you're going to be a bank teller, like start way at the bottom. But if you want to go into a training program and, banking or advertising or pretty much most things, you need a college degree. But here, the tradespeople, at least in the New York area, if you're a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter, you can make pretty good money.
Yeah.
There's so much money out there for people who are very good with their hands, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, at least in the New York suburbs, if you're looking for a contractor, my brother needs a new roof, and he wrote to a bunch of roofers, and like only one of them even wrote back to him to say, we're going to come take a look and give you an estimate, because there's such a demand for tradespeople that some of them don't even bother responding because they just have too much work.
So you're still based in New York then, yeah?
Yeah, I live in New York.
Are you living good? Are you multi-millionaire?
Manhattan.
Oh yeah, I'm a zillionaire.
That's the fax machine that you sent Joe Leno the jokes, isn't it?
No, this is actually I actually have two printers. So this one and the one up there is a color printer that I almost never use.
That's how you know you're living large.
Oh yeah. I actually have three printers because I have a scanner. It's a scanner that also prints, but I got it only to scan. So,
Jeez,
and I don't know if you can see it, but the stick behind me, this vertical thing, is
from the Game of Thrones.
It's a lamp, and it has 5 light bulbs in it. I mean, that's
too many. It's 4. Too many. Too many.
4 too many. Aye.
The lumens in that alone could, be up.
Light up New York City.
I was trying to think of the Statue of Liberty.
Have you seen Times Square? This is Times Square. That lights up Times Square.
That's Times Square. That's it. You've got a plug in your house. Boom. There you go. Times Square.
Yeah, you should see my electric bill.
It's huge. Huge. So how far are you from Times Square? That big a question?
20 miles, maybe.
That's not too bad.
Have you been since COVID and the world stopped?
No, I've only left the area here once, and that was to do an outdoor show in Connecticut. So I really haven't gone anywhere, but I just got my second vaccine a week ago. So in 6 more days, I can resume licking strangers or whatever you do.
As you should. The traditional licking of the face that you give everyone. We know of. Well,
some people lick doorknobs. I'm just licking people.
Some people lick the things with the door.
So how is it in the UK? Do you guys? You're ahead of the rest of Europe for vaccines, right?
For vaccines, we are, but in terms of the way the country's moving, in Scotland anyway, Scotland and England have got different restrictions at different times. In Scotland and Wales, and everybody's different, but we're opening up pretty much the most we have on the 26th of April. So we're still currently in a kind of lockdown. We have been since mid-December.
Have you heard of the Oxford vaccine? Have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
Apparently people are having a side effect of blood clots.
But they say it's not that common.
Yeah.
I know. They're trying to maybe stop giving people that. I don't know.
That's been debunked, that theory.
I know. There was something else in the paper today.
Well, we don't. That one actually didn't get approved yet in the US. So I think we're making it here. I got the Pfizer shot.
It seems to be a lot better. It's just to keep the storing of it. It's really hard.
Well, I think they've changed that. I think it doesn't have to be frozen to minus a zillion degrees anymore.
I know. Well, that's good though. But now people who got the Pfizer one have been totally fine. People who get the Oxford one have had flu-like symptoms for a couple of days.
I think we have three here. We've got Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna, and I think some people have had flu-like symptoms for a couple of days. But you know what? So what?
Exactly.
That's it, man. Just get on with it, man. Get it. And then what's the wait time for you? You still 12 weeks as well, or?
No, it's the Pfizer's 3 weeks in between shots, and the Moderna's 4 weeks, and the Johnson & Johnson is just one shot. And for any of them, then they say you're not fully vaccinated until 2 weeks later. So I've got
so much faster,
days to go.
So quicker.
You guys were smarter, because I think that since there's something like 80% effective after one shot, what the UK did is they said, we just want to give as many people as possible the first shot and worry about the second shot later. And from a stopping the pandemic standpoint, I think that's a better idea.
We'll soon find out. Just when we were talking about living about 20 miles from Manhattan, I think we spoke about this to another comedian actually who was in New York for a brief stint. We were talking about the costs difference of living in New York or the outskirts of New York, the suburbs maybe, as opposed to Manhattan. And I think you have to be a multi-millionaire to be able to afford to live in Manhattan.
No, you have to be pretty rich to buy an apartment. But just to give you an example, my house is worth, let's say, $700,000, just to take a guess. I bought it a long time ago. But
no, you never. Last week.
Yeah, so $700,000 would get you, a decent one-bedroom apartment, one-bedroom flat in Manhattan, depending on where. I mean, there's less expensive neighborhoods, and the other thing is the schools are better in the suburbs. So a lot of people who live in Manhattan send their kids to private schools. What you probably call, I don't know what you call them there. They're non-government schools.
Yeah. Private schools.
Private schools? I thought you called them public schools.
A public school is a school that anyone can go to.
Funded by the government.
That's the same thing here.
Yeah.
I thought you called them council schools if they were government.
Potentially. Many names. All shit. So private's the way to go.
Yeah, but private schools in the States, like in Manhattan, a private school could be like $40,000 a year per kid. So
much money. We have got a private school in Glasgow, actually. So I've got a little girl, and thought it'd be fun to see what the education is. Like £4,000 a term. And there's 4 terms. £12,000 a year to send your kid to school.
And is that a primary school?
Yep, primary. That's like when they're 5 to 12.
11, 12, aye.
And then you go to the bigger school, and it's more money, man. It's so expensive.
That's about half, I guess, of New York City. But that's Glasgow. That's not like London. So I assume it's cheaper, less expensive to live in Scotland.
Certain parts, definitely Glasgow anyway.
And the whiskey's cheaper than if you have to buy it in New York.
Is it?
I can imagine. If you need any sent over, speak to Gavin.
Well, we only get what you're not drinking, so we only get the leftovers.
Have you ever? Do you like Guinness? You ever tried Guinness?
I do like Guinness.
Yeah. Have you been to Ireland?
I've been to Ireland a few times, and I've been to the Guinness brewery.
Nice.
You done a gig in Ireland, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done a few.
Yeah.
What did you think of the comparison of a New York Guinness to an Irish Guinness?
The Guinness people will tell you it's the same, but it's got to be poured right, and not every bar in New York knows how to pour a Guinness.
So it's probably
a big Irish community in New York, is there not?
Yeah, in New York and Boston have big Irish.
Boston. I love the Boston accent. The Boston accent's really cool.
Mark Wahlberg.
Ray Donovan. Have you seen Ray Donovan?
Yeah.
They're cool, man. They're cool.
Somebody else. There's some other show where somebody has a strong Boston accent. There was a show, Rizzoli and Isles. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about a female. It takes place in Boston. And it's about a female detective, and her best friend is the medical examiner. And her boss, at the beginning of the show, had a heavy Boston accent. And then it went away by the end of the show. It was kind of fun.
I love that. That's the best. This is the sort of stuff. That's a keen eye. I would never have noticed that.
Oh no, you would. It was pretty
really, yeah.
It would be like starting with your accent and ending with my accent.
Well, you never know. By the time we're done,
I might have it. I'll try. No, I won't. No, definitely not. But
I can't fake accents. So this is all.
Have you ever tried?
Yeah, I'm terrible at it.
Go on.
No, it's okay. So are there different? I guess there's different regional accents in Scotland too, right? Like you can tell somebody from Edinburgh, somebody from Glasgow.
Everyone,
way up north.
Everyone hates the Glaswegian accent in Scotland, who live outside of Glasgow. So everybody, if you go to the Highlands, like they have a real Scottish accent, but
like Braveheart sort of accent.
Proper, not Mel Gibson, but
no,
better. How accurate is his accent?
It was decent.
It's all right. It was good, I suppose.
I've heard worse, but I feel like everybody always hates Glasgow outside, like Edinburgh, Falkirk, Motherwell. All these places aren't too keen on.
Glasgow's known as the kind of probably the roughest people would come from Glasgow, as opposed to probably the rest of the country. Like Edinburgh.
But that's not true.
I know, but Edinburgh's known for being quite posh. Aberdeen has the oil, the money. They're known for being quite posh, and Glasgow are just the riffraff, basically.
Yeah, the skid mark in Scotland. That's what they are.
We've done that all right.
I've only been to Edinburgh, but it was a very odd experience because I went into a bar and I was wearing a rugby shirt that I bought at a discount store in New York, and I didn't think anything of it. And the guy came over to me, some really rough-looking guys, and he's like, "You're wearing the colors of." I could not understand what he said.
Oh, you nearly done it.
I'm gonna get beat up because I bought a rugby shirt at a discount store and it's the wrong colors. But it wasn't like it was the colors of anything Scottish. It was just, they decided to put some colors on a shirt. And I tried to explain that. And then he said, "Oh, that's my hometown team." So he was happy I was wearing the colors. And he kept buying me drinks and drinks and drinks. And I was way trashed. And I walked out. At the end of the night, I stagger out of the pub, and I flag down a taxi, and I give him the address of the bed and breakfast that I'm staying at. And across the street from a bar is a 1-block park, right? And he was honest. He pointed to the other side of the park, and he said, "It's just right over there." And I said, "I can't make it." He drove around the block and dropped me off.
Of course, your experience of Scotland has to be when you're pissed.
Yeah. So were you drinking whiskies then?
Yeah.
What's your favourite whiskey?
I used to like Lafroig until I did a blind taste test of a bunch of whiskeys, and I tasted the Lefroy, and I'm like, this is way too inky and iodine-y for me. And then they're like, that's the one you drink. And I'm like, oh my God, it's too much. But I have a richer brother who really likes Scotch whiskey, but insists it has to be single malt and turns up his nose at anything that isn't. Wow. And I like Johnny Walker Green, which is a blend, but he won't go near it. So after the pandemic, I'm going to make him do a blind taste test to make him prove that what he likes is actually better.
Yeah.
The placebo effect's got a lot to answer for when it comes to things.
The difference between like American whiskey, Scotch whiskey, and Irish whiskey as well, they're very, very different. Like I'd probably say I prefer more Irish whiskies than Scottish whiskies, just because they tend to be a bit more.
You're gonna get thrown out of Glasgow for that.
I know. Oh,
the Irish whiskies are sweeter. Is that right?
Sweeter and
smoother.
Like
a sweeter.
I've done about 10 blind taste tests between Bushmills and Jameson, and I could never tell the difference.
Yeah.
What's Bushmills?
Irish whiskey.
Oh.
Bushmills and Jameson's are like the two biggest brands, I suppose.
Irish whiskies.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the comedy career.
Back to the guest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, talk about something fun instead of Irish whiskey.
I know. So you started off.
This is club soda, by the way. This is just
club soda.
I thought it was straight vodka as well.
I thought it was filtered whiskey.
Can you make whiskey clear?
If you filter it, yeah. You can make anything clear. No, definitely can.
There you go.
All right.
So you'd obviously been doing a bit of comedy writing for you said about a decade before you started your hand in stand-up comedy. So you done your first show, in front of one friend and one family member. So what was the experiences after that? Then how did you start to get a bit of a role on the gigs? Did you just need to get in and put your name out there to all the comedy clubs and see where it went?
No, it's harder than that. Think of it this way. People suck at anything they're new at, almost without exception. You think about like a little kid learning to play the violin. Yeah. He's going to be terrible, but he's 6 years old, so you forgive him, right? You expect him to be bad. And as a parent, you encourage the kid. And then by the time he's 15 or 16, he's probably pretty good because he's been doing it for 10 years. And whether it's acting, singing, playing an instrument, a sport, a 6-year-old athlete is going to be a 6-year-old athlete. But in comedy, you start as an adult and you're just going to be terrible for a bunch of years. So you're not going to get like paying gigs at comedy clubs because you need to work your way up and get good at it. So they have something in at least New York and LA called bringer shows, where you'll get a spot in an amateur night at a comedy club if you bring a certain number of people to be in the audience. So they may say, if you bring 7 people and they pay the cover charge, you'll get 5 minutes on stage, which is one of the ways of getting on stage, because you got to keep getting on stage to get better. So that's one of the ways to get on stage, because open mic nights are just not as helpful for getting better because nobody's listening.
Yeah, I try to find the name of the previous guest. I forgot his name. I'm so sorry.
Nate Adamski.
It's such an easy name to remember. 4 letters. Sorry, Nate. I don't think he'll watch it. It's fine.
But I'm going to email.
You should very quickly. In Glasgow, we have open mic nights, but it's the people going to the open mic night pay like £5 a ticket.
Yeah, we have the same sort of thing.
Yeah, but I think that's a better way of doing it rather than like an open mic night in America where there's every comedian there's got to watch every other comedian, whereas if everybody pays $5, there's 50 people. You know what you're expecting, so you're going to get a good night and a good audience at the same time, rather than that open mic night like I mentioned. It's not going to be great, and it's a better experience.
Well, I did one in Dublin a couple of years ago, and they barely have any open mic nights there for comedians. And so they had like 50 people in a basement of a bar, and they're like, people show up for this because I don't think it cost them anything to watch, and they buy a drink or two. So the bar made money and everybody was happy.
Yeah. We've got them all the time, every week. I think most 3-4 nights a week. The Stand, is that night, Kevin? The Stand, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The Stand.
It's comedy's quite it's massive, and especially in Glasgow anyway. Like, but the one thing I would say about American comics, like, you could probably travel, like you've performed in 5 continents. So I think it's a bit, because your accent and language is more understandable for most of the world, whereas a Scottish comedian goes to America, most people might be like, what the fuck is he saying?
It's hard. Yeah. Well, because we export movies and TV, and there's more of us. So,
many.
Craig Ferguson did okay with his accent.
Who? Craig Ferguson?
A lesser known name. Who is your...
Oh, really? He had a late night TV show here for a decade. He was
really?
I think he's from Glasgow.
Who was it?
And
Craig
came
Ferguson?
to America Craig Ferguson came here 25 years ago. Are you guys screwing with me, or do you not know who he is?
I actually don't know who this guy is. No, never heard of him.
Yes, Craig Ferguson of Hollywood, quitting the Late Late Show.
Yeah.
He hosted the Late Late Show? Nah.
Yeah.
I know who. I've seen him.
No. They don't show it in Glasgow?
No.
It's late. It
was on at 12:30 in the morning.
It's GMT plus loads of
7.
He's from Cumbernauld? No way. I remember who you're talking of, because I remember seeing they went from Craig Ferguson, like that guy, I never knew his name, to James Corden. And I was like,
yeah,
that guy's quite handsome.
Yeah, James Corden does the show.
James Corden. I'm like, it's a bit of a... I need to
Wait,
watch
so
more.
James Corden's show is on, but Craig Ferguson is from there, wasn't on?
It was nowhere near as big. Until because James Corden was on 6 different TV shows in the UK, and
so he was
very,
famous.
very, very popular.
Got it. Whereas Craig Ferguson wasn't that famous.
He made his career in America, by the looks of it.
Right. Yeah. Billy Connolly also is famous.
Billy Connolly, he's the greatest.
Do you
know
any
other? From that, I don't know any other. I don't think I know any
right.
other Scottish comedy.
Billy Connolly. How big was he in America? I know he was huge, obviously, but could Americans properly understand these jokes in context? Yeah.
Wow.
The interesting thing is Craig Ferguson pretty much lost his accent. I don't know whether if you heard his accent, you would say he sounds American. To me, he still sounds Scottish, but a lot less Scottish.
Yeah.
Billy Connolly, I think, still has his accent. He wasn't huge. He wasn't huge in America.
Yeah.
But I would say any comedy fan would know who he was. And he was on a TV show for a while.
He lived in where I live, not in the same house, obviously, because that'd be weird. He's from where I am, so yes. I know people who went to, people's parents who went to school with him. It's pretty cool that he's global.
And he's so normal as well. He is a stereotypical Glaswegian person.
There was times that he used to come back to Drumchapel and walk about just for nostalgia. But
cool guy.
Glasgow's cool, right? It's not as rough as people make it out to be.
So no, I'm still scared. I'm not.
You've got 3 printers. So
3 what?
You have 3 printers.
I don't know what you're 3 what?
Oh, don't do that. 3 printers. You have a scanner.
Printers.
Machines, 3 fax machines.
Right. That's why I'm scared, because I'm not tough. I have 3 printers. Tough people don't have 3 printers.
Nobody has that.
So who was your did you have comedy idols growing up?
Yeah, but I just want to ask, are there 3 printers in Glasgow, or the whole town?
No. We have like a Craigslist, and we email one
or is
person.
there just a long queue of people waiting to do their printing?
Do you know? I don't know if this happened in America, but maybe 10 years ago, you used to be able to go to the shop and you would print stuff from the shop for 10 pence. Was that a thing in America?
I don't know. I think most people here had a printer, or their office would have a printer. But in the old days, if you wanted to fax something, you could go
Do
to
it at
a
the
shop and they would fax it for, I don't know, $1 a page or something. And if you needed to receive a fax, you could also give the store's fax number and then go pick it up.
That's crazy, isn't it? How far you have 3 of them in your house now. Why that's a business. Right, anyway,
think about it, but we have webcams and high-speed internet. We didn't have this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I know. I'm getting too. I need to stop drinking now.
So,
I'm way too
Shaun,
nostalgic.
who was your? Did you have comedy idols growing up?
I suppose, I don't know whether I had idols. There's people I look up to, but nobody that just made me say, "Oh my God, that's the greatest person ever." But I think Robert Klein I liked. I don't know if you know who he is.
One of the previous comedians that spoke about him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably in his 80s now, but he was just a sort of a cerebral comedian. And he's been in, some movies and TV shows.
Yeah.
And Broadway plays. And, I thought Jay Leno makes me the least cool guy in the room to say it, but Jay Leno was a pretty amazing.
Jay Leno's so cool. I think people are underestimating. He done American Top Gear.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what it is, I think? He got into, there was who was going to succeed Johnny Carson got into sort of a battle. And David Letterman was the other guy trying to get that job. And he was definitely the cooler talk show host. Because he was on later and he could get away with a lot more. And he just did more innovative stuff. Like Jay Leno was just another talk show host. Letterman would do weird stuff like, drop stuff off a fourth floor tower to watch it splat, or he'd put something in a press to watch it collapse, or he'd just go out on the street and accost people. So he did things that nobody else was doing. Whereas Jay Leno was just a guy doing
sticking to the kind of the lane, keeping in his lane.
But he got the job, so people rooted for the underdog, so he didn't get the same respect.
Yeah. What about comedians like Richard Pryor? Did you watch much of that sort of comedy, or because he was a bit more of the dirty comedy side, wasn't he?
Well, just because I'm a clean comic doesn't mean I don't respect people who aren't clean.
Yeah.
It's just
people should always be clean. Do wash. just
well, I showered, and that's why my hair looks this good.
Looks good. We just get haircuts for the first time in 6 months.
Oh,
yeah. That's why it's very, very short.
Yeah.
I thought this was the stupidest thing in the world, but I went out, a couple of months into the pandemic, and I had clippers because I sort of inherited, the electric shears from my parents, and I just stuck them in a closet. And I said, I'm just going to try to cut my own hair a little bit. And I put the 1-inch guide on, and I started cutting. And I'm like, I'm never going to get this even. And I did my whole head at 1 inch. And then I looked. It doesn't look so good now the way it on camera, but it actually was one of the better haircuts I've gotten. And so for the last year, I've been cutting my own hair every month. I'm like, I don't need to go back to a barber.
Oh, there was so many people. I got my partner Paula. She cut my hair, and it was fine. It was good. But then there was people on like TikTok, Facebook, all the social medias with like elastic bands around their hair as guides how to cut their hair. And there's these people with like red marks, like all the way around here, like for days, because it's cutting the blood off their head to get a haircut. I wish I could have got away with just a. Oh, same. But I don't have the head shape for it.
Well, this looks terrible on camera. I don't know why my.
You look brilliant. Shaun, calm down. Where did the brine champagne come from?
Oh, so when I started in comedy, not every comedian when I started, 18 years ago, had a website. The ones who are making a living did, but not everybody up and coming had a website. But all the comedians who did it was basically their first name. Eli is my middle name. It's not my last name. Yeah, my last name is Breitbart. It's people would mispronounce it or spell it wrong. So that's why we never said it. Yeah. So right. So I wanted a URL, and it was $50 at the time per year, $50 per URL. And I'm like, if I get Shaun Eli, I'm going to have to get like 5 different spellings of it. And I want something memorable. And I like champagne. And I thought, brain champagne, comedy is sort of like champagne for the mind, and it rhymes and people remember it. So it's actually a good name for a website.
Yeah, no, it's catchy.
It's tasty as well.
You must be turning in your chair that Kenny's drinking Prosecco instead of champagne.
No. You know,
I
got a trademark on bringing champagne, and I got a letter from the champagne people telling me that I have to withdraw my application because it was an infringement on their trademark. So I looked up what their trademark was, and their trademark is on sparkling wine created from grapes, calling it champagne. It's made, in the Champagne region of France, and clearly that's not what I'm doing. So I said, I wrote him a satirical letter explaining that this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and that they screwed up because in theory I could make wine out of cherries and make sparkling wine out of cherries and call it champagne, and they can't sue me because their trademark is only on grapes. And they never bothered me again.
Clever, so clever. The Prosecco is just champagne. It's just made not in. Yeah, there you go. Did you know that, Gavin? Aye,
because it's only a specific.
No, you didn't. You did not know that.
There's a specific region in France, isn't there?
It's called Champagne.
Yeah. Is that what it's called? I didn't know that was the name of it. Aye, but there we go.
Oh, you didn't know, mate.
You guys need to spend your future kids' tuition money and travel and go to France.
I know.
That's the only place I've been to every country. I've just not been to France.
So,
have you been to America?
I've been to New York, LA.
Oh, I didn't see you
San
there.
Francisco.
When were you here?
I had longer hair because.
Did you have a red mark across your face?
Seven red marks. I looked like I just stepped out the jungle. I had like war paint on. But no, New York's cool. It's busy. It's very.
I mean, it's no Glasgow.
Humid.
It's humid. You were here in August?
I was in this. It was July-ish. Yeah. Not the good time. Like you want to see New York in the snow.
Christmas time.
That's the dream. It's Home Alone 2.
Cold.
That's what you want.
Warm. We live in Glasgow. It's used to be used to have been cold.
It snowed here last week.
Really?
We had snow. Yeah. It's so stupid, the weather here. I feel like someone rolls the dice and that's what the weather comes out.
It's I would tell you it's 70 here today, but I don't know what that is in centigrade. Maybe 19. It's like room temperature outside.
If I've got my temperature at 20, it's too hot. It's too hot. I don't like it.
What?
You should move to Aberdeen.
Aye, very, very cold. So you mentioned obviously you performed in five continents. So first of all, have you got a favourite city or country that you performed in?
Yeah, but you're going to hate me.
England?
Edinburgh?
No, Ireland.
Oh no, I love the Irish.
Cool. Irish is cool.
We love the Irish.
Cool.
Just not the English.
Yeah.
Okay.
That only kid. We don't really bother.
It's just some of them. Some of them.
What was good about the gig in Ireland then? What was different?
They just seemed to like me a lot. It was almost, I don't want to insult the Irish, but it felt like they were starved for entertainment. Like they didn't have a lot of comedy. Yeah. Whereas in New York, you're held to a high standard because there's so many great comedians in New York that you really got to do a good job, or they're just like, you're not as funny as the last guy. But
how did you end up there? Like, how does that come about?
I emailed. The beauty of the internet. Couldn't have done this, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Anyway, I emailed every club I could find and every person I knew who'd been there and said, I want to perform in Ireland. What do you have? And a few places in Dublin booked me, and I got booked also in Liverpool and somewhere else. And Liverpool was interesting because the other comedians in the show acted like I was important, and I'd never had that before. Like here, I'm just some guy, and I'm clearly not as funny or as important as a lot of people I work with, but I was the top comedian there, and they were asking me questions like I was an expert. And I'm used to being the guy asking the questions, and I was answering. So that was kind of neat. Why do you think that was? Do you think it was because you traveled from America? You had a good stand-up pedigree? I'm definitely exotic in places like that. In London, I would not be because you got a lot of great American comedians going there and English ones as well. Yeah. But in Ireland, they don't get the same traveling comedians.
Was there one joke that really hit home, like a big home run, or was it all just amazing?
I can't think of anything in particular that they liked. It just they
just
liked
a
my
good
comedy.
show. Everything flowed, and it all
Just worked out. Yeah.
Do you think there's a formula for making like a good joke?
I don't think so. You can be formulaic. Like the late night TV shows, monologue jokes are pretty formulaic. Like you just take two things and you reverse them. Like you might say, this joke wouldn't apply today, but let's say Trump was still president. You might say Trump met. Well, this is like a typical late night TV joke. It's like Trump met with Putin. One of them is a madman, tyrannical dictator, and the other one's Russian. That's the kind of you just switch two things.
Yeah,
I feel like the jokes are so in a wee bit like cringy, like because you see it coming, what's happening. It's methodical. Even James Corden, seeing him doing it, I'm like, that's not what you would do. I feel like it's like that's.
No, you wouldn't do that in a comedy club. That's not the kind of stuff. And I do more storytelling. It's more stuff that's happening.
Yeah. Have you got through your travels performing? Have you got a place or a city or a country that you didn't like particularly performing in?
I wouldn't say I didn't like it, but it was really hard for me. Was South Africa, and I thought South Africa. It's a Western country; they speak English, but the culture was so different that it just didn't. Every night I was like, I had to try different jokes because half of what I did didn't work.
Their sense of humor is so dry, and there's a thing called the Rugby Sevens that we had in Glasgow, and I went to that. I was drunk, surprisingly, very surprisingly, and there's a bar in Glasgow called Walkabout, and it's like an American bar, and everyone went there, and I went up to a table of South Africans, and I was like, "How good was today?" And I was like, "Your team was amazing. Like, you guys, how you having a good night?" And the guy went, "If you don't go away, you will have a bad night." And I'm like,
"What?
Come on." I'm just a stupid drunk. I'm like, "No, like, let's have a drink. It's fine." He's like, "My night will be better when you walk away." It was just so antisocial, so not in rugby.
Wait, his team had just lost?
No, they played good. They played well. Scotland weren't good, but we're used to that. Like, this guy just wasn't happy. Like, and I'm like, that's my only experience of South Americans.
That sounds like Americans. Like, if our team, there's a lot of people. They'll talk like they're part of the team. Like, our team won. Like, what did you do? and people, I can understand being happy when your team wins. I can't understand rioting because your team lost. Like, it's a game. It's entertainment. It's got nothing to do with you.
That's hard for Gavin just now, though. His team's terrible. His soccer team.
Anyway.
So bad. He's going to smash up his room.
There's nothing in his room. Look at it. There's nothing there but a microphone.
And a Guinness. Guinness thing. Obviously through your travels, South Africa, what was where have you performed? I'm not asking for a list of cities, but your top, when you think of it, maybe top 5 places that you performed.
I performed in a bunch of places on the South Island of New Zealand, and that I had a really good time with. And a couple of cities, actually 3 cities in Australia: Sydney, Melbourne, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, in Hobart, Tasmania. And I don't know if you know anything about Tasmania. I didn't until I got there. But
it's tiny.
It's tiny, and it only has about 50,000 people. And they have the reputation of being inbred. That's sort of like the joke was, and we have the same sort of thing about small towns in the South in America, that like everybody's married to their cousin or their sister. And so that's the reputation that Tasmania has. So when I was opening a show in Melbourne, I was saying, I've had a great time touring around Australia. I was invited to do shows in Melbourne and Sydney, and I went to Hobart, met my cousins, and that's all I had to say. And they started laughing. I'm like, I don't even need to get to the punchline. You know where this is going.
Just have an educated joke. So when did you do, what year was that? You done that?
that was just before the pandemic. That was December 2020.
Wow.
Very recent.
So recently. Because I went to the comedy festival in Melbourne.
Edinburgh?
No, Melbourne.
Oh, Melbourne. Oh.
Yeah. See, I've travelled. You see that? That came around that joke. And the first guy up was American, second guy's Australian, the last guy was from Glasgow. Aye, it was my two friends that were with me from England, and he's like, "Oh, how you doing? I'm from Glasgow," and they're like, "He's for your bit. He's for where you're from," and I'm like, "I don't need this. If this guy knows that I'm from Glasgow, it's just gonna be so shit for me. Like, he's just gonna take the piss.
He's gonna rip you a new arsehole.
He's gonna want to fight because you guys are tough.
They're so tough. The toughest." But was
I heard
Americans
Mike Tyson is from Glasgow.
And he was.
He should be.
He's formally from Glasgow, but he wasn't tough enough. He wasn't. You need to be tough.
He had to leave. He was just scared.
Exiled. Get out. No longer required. But no, did you find any Americans there from New York when you were?
I don't think so. Let me think about this.
Did you know?
I don't think I saw any New Yorkers when I was touring. Well, there's a comedy club in Bangkok, Thailand, which is run by a guy from Boston.
Oh,
and
wow!
So I was there, but not a New Yorker. So I don't think in that entire trip, I don't think I met anybody from New York.
I didn't even know there was a comedy club in Bangkok.
Yeah. 7 nights. I mean, I don't know now because of the pandemic, but it was open 7 nights a week.
Wow, that's amazing.
And they did something. I mean, America is very capitalist. He did something that I thought was brilliant. He had a poster on the back wall, and it listed all the countries, and it had check marks next to the countries. And if you bought a mixed drink or you bought a drink for a comedian, they would you get another mark for your country. And it didn't mean anything, right? It meant absolutely nothing, but it was an excuse to sell drinks. And it was brilliant because he said, if you're wondering why you could, when you buy a drink, you could either get a point for your country or take a point away from a different country.
Amazing.
So he said, if you're wondering why there's no points for Ireland, it's because every single time one of them buys a drink, they take one away from England.
So clever.
So you said you like your a kind of storytelling method of comedy. Do you ever get involved with the crowd? Do you ever interact with the crowd?
Sometimes, especially because I MC a lot of shows, and when you're the or compare host, whatever you call them there, when you do that, you have to open. You don't have to, but it helps, at least in a comedy club. And there's a lot of distractions to open the show by talking to the audience. We call it crowd work. What's your name, where you're from, and to get a rapport going with the audience, that really helps. So I do a lot of that, but I don't tend to have a lot of audience interaction after I get things started because I just have my material. I'm not bad at it, and there's a lot of comics who make it a big part of what they do, but it's just I don't do a lot of it.
What about like hecklers? Do you get many?
That's what I was going to ask you. Going to ask you.
It's the weirdest thing because I discovered early on, because I used to be a banker, so I would show up reasonably well dressed.
What were you? Sorry? You were a what?
A banker.
There's other words that rhyme with that. Heckled. You got heckled?
No. That's not a heckle. I didn't understand what you said.
No, you know.
Well, I had to be a banker because I'm not from Glasgow, so I'm not tough enough to do anything else.
Not tough. There's you and Mike Tyson.
Right.
Both big bankers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Loads of money.
Would you give Mike Tyson your money to invest for you?
Yeah.
What you're saying is you're dumb.
Very, very scared of Mike Tyson.
I don't know. You're scared of him. I thought you're tougher than him.
No, not now. Not that this is becoming a serious conversation. Yeah.
You think he's going to come there and beat you up for having this conversation?
100%.
I'm going to send him your address. Hold on. Billy Connolly will defend you.
He will. Sorry. So heckling.
So you're right. I guess you did heckle me. I found that, if you dress a little better than the other comics, you get very little heckling. I mean, it's not as big, I think, in the States as it is in the UK. But like right now, I'm wearing a polo shirt. I've just got a shirt with a collar. It's not fully buttoned down, but it has a collar. And I would wear, neat jeans and shoes instead of sneakers. And they would talk back to the guy in the T-shirt, but not to me. But we also you learn pretty quickly why somebody's heckling. Because
being a dick.
Sometimes they're so drunk they don't realize it's not a conversation, and then you just got to give them 2 seconds of talking to them. They don't mean to be interrupting; they're just drunk. Sometimes it's a guy who's on a date and he's pissed off that his date is laughing at that guy on stage and not him, and he's not the center of attention, so he wants to interrupt and prove how tough he is. Or it might be a bachelorette party, which is every comedian hates bachelorette parties because it's the bride's big night, right, with her friends. She's supposed to be the center of attention. And then she goes to a comedy club and it's not about her, it's about everybody. And so she'll get and she's drunk. So she'll interrupt a lot. And those are the worst because it's really hard to get them to shut up.
Yeah.
What do you do in that? Like, because you said you've had that.
A lot of times what I found a couple of things. One is if you ask them their name, it does 2 things. One is they're not anonymous anymore, so it's scarier. And the other is you're addressing them so they feel like they're being respected. But you talk to them for a couple of minutes, you just have a conversation, whatever. You can make jokes, you make jokes. And then you say, you know what, Sherry, it's been lovely talking to you, but I have all these other people I have to talk to. And then you focus away from her and just start telling your jokes. And usually they just quiet down.
Such a tactical...
Or you kick her in the face.
That very quick, that saves 2 minutes. But it's such a tactical, it's like a dance. It's not just go out, do your material because you don't know who's in the room, you don't know how people will react. I just find it's an underrated skill, being able to go out and entertain. It doesn't matter if it's 10,000, 100,000 people, just being able to entertain anybody. I'm terrible at telling stories.
You
terrible at telling stories.
I hope you can. It doesn't always work, but usually. I mean, we get good at it through practice.
What's your biggest bomb? Like, what is your biggest just,
I mean, it happens from time to time. It doesn't happen much anymore because we learn, if they don't like this, try that, change the subject. And you also learn you have to address the elephant in the room. If it sucks, talk about it. Just let them know, this isn't fun for me either. Like, and sometimes you can get their sympathy. You're just like, hey, did you ever have a bad day at work? I'm having one now.
What was the line in the Ivy League website? Or was it LinkedIn? My job's to make
it's my job to make
your job is.
It's my job to make you forget how much you hate your job.
I actually laughed at that earlier on. I enjoyed that.
That came about by accident. When I started in comedy, I was at a networking event. And it was like at the Princeton Club, at an Ivy League institution. And so they were all snobby about everything. And the guy running the networking event went around and he said, you just tell us what your job is. And I said, and some jobs are complicated to explain, right? Some jobs are easy. If you're a plumber or a dentist, you just say that. But if you're like an investment banker or a scientist where things are really complicated, sometimes it's, so I just said, and I didn't mean this as a punchline. I just said, my job speaks for itself. I'm a stand-up comedian. And they laughed thinking it was like a pun, but like, I didn't think it was funny at all. I was just explaining, I don't have one of these complicated jobs, but they laughed at it. And then he said, yeah, but we need more detail. Like, what more detail do you need for tell jokes? So,
that's a very Glaswegian approach towards that.
Yeah.
By the way, mate, I've told you what.
So he said, well, what's like the purpose of your job and the function in society? Like, that was a stupid freaking question. So I said, it's my job to make you forget how much you hate your job. And people like that as an answer. So I'm like, I'll put that on my website. It's on my business card.
It's a lovely way to express or explain your job.
Very much so. So what's been happening during the past year? Have you done
nothing? Nothing.
No.
Nothing. Three nothings. Nothing online. Have you done the
I've done Zoom shows. I've done Zoom shows. I've done some outdoor shows, which I hope I'll resume again because it's just getting warm here in New York. But in the winter, no outdoor shows. But outdoor shows are tough because the audience, it's not just us here needing to hear laughter. The audience needs to hear laughter all around them. When you're outdoors, the laughs just disappear.
It just escapes. Is there not in Melbourne, there's like in the park, there was an outdoor comedian shows, like comedy shows. Is that in Central Park?
They've done some in some of the parks in New York. It's hard. I haven't done those. I've just done them like in the street in front of people I know. And I did an outdoor show. I did a drive-in show. There's a theater that just they allowed 50 cars in the parking lot, and they had a PA system, but they also, you could go through their radio so they could tune in on their radios. And the people just opened their windows and you could hear them laughing through the windows.
Amazing.
It's pretty cool.
Bill Burr was talking about that on Joe Rogan's podcast. He said it was one of the best things he's ever done because it was just so open, and it was the closest he's came back towards interaction at a comedy club. Yeah,
I mean, people would, if they liked a joke, they would laugh. They would also flash their lights or honk their horns. But here's the thing. Sometimes you'd be doing a setup and they'd hear something they like you'd be talking about, so you have a joke about a dentist and they hear the word dentist and they'd be like, oh, I'm a dentist. So they'd honk their horn and you're like, I got to get to the punchline. Stop it, they're up.
I don't really get to the punchline.
If they're honking the horn, nobody can hear you.
Yeah. What's the plan going forward then? So things are on the up, I suppose, from what they've been. Have you got any sort of dates in mind that comedy clubs might open or anything like that?
What happened to Kenny?
Oh, he's just off his screen, but he'll be back in a second.
All right.
There he is.
There, he's back. Okay. I just today booked 2 shows at a theater in Connecticut for June, 2 Saturday nights, and a couple of because I do shows in comedy clubs, but also in a lot of theaters. Yeah. And I booked, so I'm waiting to hear from a bunch of other theaters because Connecticut now, the theater that I just booked the show at has, I think, 230 seats, but they're only selling 70. They're only allowed at limited capacity. But I'm hoping by June they'll have more. Yeah. So some places are just starting to open up. New York just last weekend opened up comedy clubs for the first time at limited capacity. Wow. So
that's a step forward, I suppose.
I haven't done any of those yet because it was only just the first weekend. Yeah. But I figure I'll be doing that. And then by the end of June, any American who wants a vaccine will have had access to it. So I suspect, at least in the Northeast, where people aren't idiots and they're getting the vaccine, things will be better. Some places, like some states, people are like, I'm not getting a vaccine. Okay, get sick.
Nah, I was going to ask you if the whole don't get it, it's conspiracy. Fucking hell, shut up, man. But what's the biggest gig you've ever done? What's the biggest?
I don't know. Maybe 1,000 people.
That's cool, man.
In a big, in a big place, a big theater.
Yeah.
But typically my audience is like a comedy club might be a couple hundred people, a theater maybe 400 or 500.
I definitely think for comedy, it's even it's more intimate, it's funnier, it's better because I went to see Kevin Hart came to Glasgow and there was 25,000 or 30,000 in the Hydro, and it was, don't get me wrong, it was funny, it was good, but it wasn't as intimate as what you would expect.
Right, because you barely see the guy.
Exactly. I was in the heavens as well.
Yeah, so. He's so small. He's so tiny.
Right. He's even smaller when you're a mile away.
Like an action man on the stage. It's like...
Well, here's the thing. If you watch like Netflix specials with some of these people and they're doing a show. If you watch it, well, not on my screen. My TV's only this big. If you watch, well, that wasn't good laughter. If you watch it, and these people in like these 3,000 seat places, they tell a joke and there's laughter and laughter. And it's like, you wouldn't get 25 seconds of laughter on that joke in a club. You'd get 10 seconds, which is fine. It's just like, I would rather the guy got 10 seconds and you get to hear more jokes, because an hour of that is really only a half hour of stand-up comedy and a half hour of laughter.
Yeah.
I think it takes a special type of person to get, I think, laughter. And Kevin Hart sold out a football stadium, and it was good. It was funny, but I feel like you see that laughter encourages you to laugh, to feel.
That's why when you watch a situation comedy, they do it in front of a live audience and you can hear laughter. It's because they want the people on TV to hear other people laugh.
I went to see Dave Chappelle in London, and it was only like 100 people. It was amazing. It was unbelievable. It was a weird situation when you go in, because they take your mobile phone and they put it in like a Ziploc bag and tag it as if like you're going to prison. But no, like it was amazing because it's such an intimate. You feel part of it.
You feel involved
rather than there's 24,999 other people here. There was only like 100.
Well, it's beautiful because you know he's 5 feet away from you. It's a different experience.
Yeah. And at the end of it, like everyone went up to shake his hand because it was pre-COVID.
I was going to say, and they all got COVID.
Everybody got it, man. Just like Dave again. But it was so nice. Like he was like taking pictures and shaking everybody's hand. Whereas you don't get that way. Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart is still in the same arena shaking hands from the show he did a year and a half ago.
That's 5,000 people there. From the football stadium. That's right.
Yeah.
I would
small now.
I would take COVID to shake Dave Chappelle's hand.
What do you think of Dave Chappelle? Do you think he's?
I think he's very funny. I haven't met the guy, but here's something that happened. I was doing a show in Ohio with a colleague of mine, Wally Collins, and we're in a synagogue in Ohio doing a show. And at the end,
synagogue. I feel like I know what a synagogue is, but
a temple, Jewish temple.
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry.
There's no Jews in Glasgow?
Oh, really?
I don't think we have a synagogue though.
Oh,
I think we have. But anyway.
Nevertheless.
So we're doing a show and there's like 70 people in the audience. And we're doing a show and there's 3 of us on stage. And at the end of the show, we do Q&A. We take questions from the audience. And we're in Ohio. And in Dayton, Ohio, and one of the audience members says, Dave Chappelle lives 10 miles from here. And while he's on stage, my colleague, he's like, Dave Chappelle is one of my best friends. So they're like,
no way.
They're like, call him up and tell him we'll meet him and they named some place like the Milk Mart or something. Like, tell him we'll meet him at the Milk Mart. And while he takes out his phone and he calls Dave Chappelle, unfortunately, Chappelle was out of town. He was in Vegas and he didn't answer his phone. But it would have been so cool. Like, hey, Dave Chappelle, get over here to the synagogue and see your friend Wally.
Shit, that's amazing because he seems like the kind of guy who would be like, right, give me 15 minutes. And he would have like been there. What was he done a Netflix special with who was it? The bearded guy. I'll Google it quickly because during that whole thing that he's in the city centre and he's like speaking to just everybody in his town.
I think it's important for these guys to be humble though. Do you know, like?
I think most of the people who succeed are nice guys.
Yeah.
I think, and especially in stand-up comedy, you get most of your breaks when you start out, not from club owners or bookers, but from other comics. They're like, oh, I have a show, come and open for me. And if you're a jerk, they're not going to do that. So you have to be, I mean, there are some exceptions, but if you're not a nice guy, you tend to have a tougher time.
Yeah.
It was Letterman, Dave Letterman.
Oh.
He came back and done like a series with like famous people on Netflix and done My Next Guest Is, and it was Dave Chappelle. And you see during COVID, like Dave Chappelle walking around, and the one he done the one with like George Floyd and stuff. They talk about that, and it's amazing the fact that he's just back in his hometown and he's treated like an equal. He's not treated
like a superstar.
The world, as the world knows him, as Dave Chappelle, which is pretty cool.
Well, a lot of people, there's a lot of entertainers who just go back to where they're from and they like it
there.
Yeah. Who's the most famous person you've ever met?
Most famous person I've ever met? Well, aside from you guys. Although we haven't technically met.
Well,
I feel like this is meeting people these days. This is exactly like what it's going to have to be for the rest of it.
People are doing virtual dates.
That's weird. I heard that. I was like, no, I'll meet you in person when COVID's over. I'm not going to Because what happens? Let's say you go on 10 virtual dates, right? You do this and you think you get to know each other and you meet in person, there's no chemistry. And then you're like, I just wasted 40 hours talking to you on Zoom. And it turns out, you don't look like your picture.
Yeah.
Sure. The UK made a TV show out of this.
It did.
We had a full TV show dedicated to people dating online. Yeah.
Bizarre.
So who's the most famous man?
The most famous comedian I've ever worked with is probably Jerry Seinfeld. The most famous.
He's one of the most famous comedians ever. Just for the TV show Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I'm trying to think of anybody else famous. I was in the next urinal in a bathroom from former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Does that count?
Right.
We didn't pee on each other though. I mean, so
does it count?
But it counts more. It counts more when you swap urine with someone. It's special. It's special.
Right.
Well, Shaun, I've got one very special question for you that we ask all our guests that come on. But just before, Kenny, you get anything you want to add? You've got a wee question normally here.
Sometimes this is where it annoys me because Gavin asks the most important question. I just ask, what's your pet peeve?
I think maybe it's the German side of me. I don't know, but things that are inefficient bother me. So if people just do stupid stuff that slows you down, like rubbernecking at an auto accident, you're driving along and somebody for you guys, maybe it's this way. They look over and slow down and there's a traffic jam, even though the accident's on the side of the road now, people have to slow down and look.
It's a nosy bastards, we call it.
Or somebody will get up to the front of the grocery store line and the cashier will ring up their groceries and then they'll be like, oh, I guess I should take out my credit card now. And I'm like, you've just been standing there for 5 minutes. Why aren't you ready?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Maybe I'm German. Because that's what fucking pisses me off. See, I'm just going to go back to your point with the traffic thing. You see traffic for miles that way, and you're driving, you're like, idiots. But then you see the accidents on the other side, and you get to the accident, but you're 15 cars away from the accident. You can see everybody. Brake lights.
Yeah.
It's just stop. You're going to cause another accident. Just
when you go,
stop being so fucking nosy.
I think the comics should. The police should pop a video camera.
The comics. Dave Chappelle, Shaun, Kevin Hart, Billy Connolly should all be just.
They're all comedians. They're all police.
Getting it. So
I think that. Well, police don't have video cameras. Comedians have video cameras. The police should pop a video camera down at the scene of an accident, and everybody who slows down should get a ticket in the mail.
Yeah,
that would be
a very good idea.
What an idea! I think my question is better than yours, Gavin. So I get the diluted question, and
they can get all the tickets, and you could print them and send them to everybody.
Right, I have 3 printers.
Right, so,
but I don't have a fax machine, so I can't make the tickets funny.
You should. It's going to sound like that, but you should quickly, once we come off this, Google the big conspiracy about printers, because they say that the ink in printers never. Just Google it. I'm just talking shite now. I've had too much.
Don't know where to go with that.
I know.
Right, you know what? He's putting up the website now of the printer.
www.printersconspiracy.co.uk.
.com if you're in America.
He's making this up.
So, Shaun, one question that we ask all our guests that come on the show with a few interesting answers. So here it is. So if you could have one drink and one drink only, what would you have and who would it be with?
What would it be? I like my favorite drink probably is Bollinger champagne. Right. Sorry, Kenny, the Prosecco drinker. But a lot of champagnes I like. Who would it be with? You besides you guys, of course.
Of course.
So American.
Who would it be with? Do I get to date the person I'm having the drink with, or is it just
anybody?
That's the partly the point of the question.
Because I'm single, so
anybody you want, dead or alive, you can ask anybody.
Well, I have a big crush on our vice president, but she's married, so probably not.
Is she not pegged to be president at some point?
Joe Biden's like 75 or something, is he not?
Yeah, so if Joe Biden runs for re-election, then Joe Biden will still be vice president if he wins. If Joe Biden doesn't run for re-election in 3 years, then she might be the candidate, but we don't know. He'll probably run.
Yeah.
But who would I have a drink with? I mean, there's a lot of people I would have a drink with.
Well, we won't
alive or dead. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King.
That's two.
JF
Kennedy. Shaun.
But I'm trying to think of like I have a crush on. I forgot the actor's name. She was on a show called Two Broke Girls.
I think was she in Marvel movies?
Yeah, I think she was in.
I will tell you who she is because I know.
Kat Denning.
Kat
Dennings.
Yeah. She was Max in Two Broke Girls. She's cool.
She is.
I'd have a drink with her. I don't think she'd have a drink with me. Is this, can I force them into having a drink with me?
Yes.
No, she must. She must.
Okay,
so
well.
I'll get an email out.
We organise it.
Right.
She has to have the same drink.
There you go. In Glasgow.
She doesn't have to have the same drink. She can have scotch.
Stinking pub down the road. Horrible pub. But that's where these things happen.
Okay.
But you'll be fine.
But didn't you find out it takes like 3 days to fly to Glasgow from New York?
No, it currently with the whale, the way the whale is, it's fine. We'll figure it out. Just relax.
All right. Well, I would. You know what? If I can have a drink with anybody, I want it to be the pilot who lands this 7
on the whale.
On the whale, because that's pretty good flying.
That's pretty good.
That's what I love. See jokes that do full circle. I love them. I love those.
Yeah.
But listen, this was amazing. I love this. I know.
Thanks. I want to know. I want to ask you guys the same question. Who would you have drinks with?
We've done this before, but it's fine. We'll do it again. It's fine. It changes sometimes.
Give a different answer.
Yeah, I've probably changed mine about 3 or 4 times. Right, Kenny, you go first.
I wish you never done that. That's pure. That's shite to do that to somebody. I would love. I'd love to just go out for a wee steak dinner and a wee bottle of wine with Paula. I'd love that, don't you? Gav, top bat, mate.
That's his girlfriend.
Top bat. Oh. That's my good lady. It's not just run down. No, it does because it'd be nice. I'd love to get out.
Shaun, right.
I've not been in a restaurant for over a year. Like.
Okay, but aside from somebody you don't know, who would you have a drink?
Yeah. Somebody I don't know. This is where it becomes a difficult question, isn't it?
That's what you've asked me.
The current manager.
I want to change my answer. I want to change my answer.
No, we're asking me. We're asking me just now, Shaun.
I want to change my answer to Paula.
Oh, there you go.
You should. There you go. You should. You so should. Just make sure,
Does it come home?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Steven
so
Gerrard?
I would like to. The current manager of the soccer club I support, and he played for Liverpool. Actually, he was a captain.
What's the name of the club?
Rangers, Glasgow Rangers.
Glasgow. Okay.
You support them now, Shaun?
I definitely do now, unless Gavin gets a better team.
It's the opposite team.
It's the opposite. Yeah, it's the Glasgow rivalry.
Aye, so that's what they're called. They're called the Glasgow rivalry.
So we've got Rangers and we've got Celtic. So I'm Celtic and Kenny's Rangers.
Oh no, definitely Rangers. Sorry.
Thank you, Shaun. Bite the
right. So
you've had so much time, Gavin.
What was your drink though?
Was that a pint, mate? A pint of Tennent's, man.
Sorry. Okay.
I've not had a proper
it was a football manager.
Pint. Exactly. He's a soccer man. Football.
You could say football. I know what you're talking about. And your audience is from Europe anyway, right?
I don't know. It's all over the place sometimes.
Right. I would have a whiskey sour. I like a whiskey sour with.
So just quickly, what is in a whiskey sour?
That's whiskey. I think it's lemon juice, egg white, and something else, but I can't remember what the other one is. It's nice, so. And I would have it with Matthew McConaughey. He's my favourite actor.
You've said that before. He's cool though. He is.
I've not
cool.
said that before.
Have you read his book? You've said that before. Trust me. You were drunk, but
so were you. So you fucking can't remember.
Aye, but I'm telling you, Gavin.
I've got his book.
But nevertheless,
I've not read it.
No. Anyway, so you're changing your answer to my partner, Paula.
Yeah.
Rather than the Vice President of America. Just cool. That's nice. I'm sitting down with Stephen Gerrard, the current manager of the football club I support, and Gavin sitting down with Matthew McConaughey.
How often do your teams play each other?
3 or 4 times a season.
They play in 10 days.
10 days they do.
Will there be an audience, or is it just the teams?
Nah, it's just the teams.
It's so shit. You should, if you can be bothered, quickly Google like Old Firm.
The Old Firm
the
derby.
Atmosphere, the Old Firm derby, the atmosphere in the stadiums is crazy. The good thing is it kicks off at midday, which is nice. So you drink alcohol from like 8 in the morning.
So how is that any different from any other day in
Scotland?
Exactly.
No,
anyway,
caught us out.
Shaun, this has been brilliant. So thanks very much for your time and
absolutely amazing.
So just quickly, where can everybody find you? So brainchampagne.com.
Brainchampagne.com, and I will tell you, there's not just comedy videos on my website. There's 50,000 words worth of jokes on my website. And to give you an idea of what that is,
half a novel,
yeah.
And
it's all free, and you can sign up for my mailing list and get comedy every month. And if you send me an airline ticket, I will come to Glasgow because I've been vaccinated.
There we go.
10 hours. We'll get the links in the video when we post it, because amazing, man.
We'll do that.
I love it.
Oh, and if you send me a first class airline ticket, I will bring a vial of the Pfizer vaccine.
And I can
so cheap.
Sell it on the side. Yeah.
Is there 2 of them though? So we get the.
I think they have 10 shots in them. I'm not sure.
10. That's good. Good.
There you go.
Drug dealer or comedian, almost author. Legend.
No, Shaun, pleasure. So thanks very much. We'll let you know when we're going to post it. And take care.
All right.
All the best.
Thanks, guys.
See you soon. Bye bye.